You never expect your world to shatter over Sunday dinner, when the smell of roast chicken fills the kitchen and your children are laughing over who gets the last dinner roll. But there I was, watching my sister-in-law Rachel look directly at my 8-year-old son Tyler and say with a cold smile, "You know, Tyler, you look absolutely nothing like your daddy. Are you sure you even belong in this family?" The room went dead silent, forks frozen halfway to mouths, and I felt my heart drop into my stomach as I watched my little boy's face crumble with confusion and hurt. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I never imagined that the family I married into would become the source of my greatest pain. When I said I do to Marcus 5 years ago, I thought I was gaining not just a husband, but a loving extended family. Marcus had always spoken so warmly about his older sister Rachel, how she'd practically raised him after their parents divorced, how she was fierce and protective and would do anything for family. What he failed to mention was that Rachel's definition of family came with very specific terms and conditions. Rachel had been suspicious of me from the moment Marcus brought me home. I was a single mother with a 3-year-old son from a previous relationship, and to Rachel, that made me damaged goods. She never said it directly, not at first, but I could see it in the way she'd study Tyler when she thought no one was looking, the way she'd make little comments about blood family and real connections. She had this way of making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage, like I was some kind of interloper who had tricked her precious little brother into taking on another man's child. Marcus, bless his heart, never saw it. He absolutely adored Tyler from day one, adopted him legally when we got married, and treated him like his own flesh and blood. To Marcus, Tyler wasn't his stepson, he was simply his son, end of story. He'd take Tyler fishing, help with homework, cheer at Little League games, and never once made Tyler feel like anything less than completely wanted and loved. But Rachel, she watched all of this with narrowed eyes, like she was waiting for something to go wrong, like she was keeping score of some invisible game where Tyler would never measure up. The tension had been building for months. Little comments here and there, passive-aggressive remarks about genetics and family resemblance. She'd make observations about how Tyler had my brown eyes instead of the family's signature blue ones, how he was more artistic like me rather than athletic like Marcus and their father had been. She'd compare him unfavorably to her own 2 children, pointing out how they had the family nose or those Mitchell cheekbones. Each comment was like a tiny paper cut, seemingly insignificant on its own, but collectively creating a pattern of exclusion that was impossible to ignore. Marcus would dismiss my concerns whenever I brought them up. "Sarah, you're being too sensitive," he'd say. "Rachel loves Tyler. She's just protective of family, that's all. You know how she is." But I knew the difference between protective and possessive, between love and conditional acceptance. Rachel didn't love Tyler. She tolerated him, and only barely at that. The worst part was watching Tyler start to internalize her subtle rejections. He'd started asking me questions that broke my heart. "Mom, why don't I look like Dad Marcus? Why does Aunt Rachel always talk about the Mitchell family stuff but never include me? Do you think Dad Marcus wishes I was really his real son?" Each question was like a knife to my chest because I could see Rachel's poison slowly seeping into my sweet boy's mind, making him question his place in the only family he'd ever known. Tyler's biological father had never been in the picture. He'd walked away the moment he found out I was pregnant, and honestly, good riddance. Tyler had no memory of him, no connection to him, no desire to know him. Marcus was his dad in every way that mattered. The man who taught him to ride a bike, who read him bedtime stories, who showed up to every school play and parent-teacher conference. But Rachel's constant subtle undermining was making Tyler doubt the security of that relationship, and I was watching my confident, happy child slowly withdraw into himself. The Sunday dinner where everything exploded had started like so many others. Marcus had suggested we have family dinner at Rachel's house, something we did twice a month to maintain family connections. I'd made my famous chocolate chip cookies for dessert. Tyler had drawn pictures for his cousins, and we'd arrived with smiles and hugs all around. Rachel's husband, David, was there, along with their 2 children, Emma and Jake, who were 10 and 12 respectively. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. The kids played together, the adults caught up on work and local news, and I started to relax, thinking maybe I'd been overthinking Rachel's attitude. But then dinner was served, and as we all gathered around Rachel's perfectly set dining table, I noticed her watching Tyler again with that calculating look I'd come to dread. Tyler was excitedly telling everyone about his art class project, how his teacher had chosen his painting to display in the school's main hallway. Marcus was beaming with pride, ruffling Tyler's hair and bragging about his talented son. Emma and Jake were asking to see pictures of the painting, and David was nodding approvingly, genuinely interested in Tyler's achievement. But Rachel sat there with a tight smile, picking at her food, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She waited until Tyler finished his story, waited for that perfect moment when everyone was relaxed and happy, and then she struck, with surgical precision. "Tyler, honey," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "You know, I was looking at old family photos the other day, and I couldn't help but notice something interesting." She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. "You really don't look anything like your daddy, do you? I mean, not at all. Are you absolutely sure you belong in this family?" The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Tyler's fork clattered to his plate, his face went pale, and his big brown eyes filled with tears he was desperately trying not to shed. Emma and Jake stopped eating, staring at their mother with confused expressions. David's jaw dropped, and Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. But I felt something entirely different rising in my chest, something hot and fierce and protective that made my vision blur at the edges. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Rachel," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "what did you just say to my son?" She had the audacity to look innocent, to tilt her head like she'd asked about the weather. "I'm just making an observation, Sarah. The child doesn't share any physical traits with our family. Surely you've noticed." Tyler's bottom lip was quivering now, and he was looking back and forth between Marcus and me like he was trying to solve a puzzle that would determine his entire future. Marcus looked stunned, like he couldn't believe his beloved sister had just attacked his son so cruelly and publicly. "Tyler, buddy," Marcus started, reaching across the table toward him, but Tyler flinched away, his chair scraping against the floor as he pushed back from the table. "I need to use the bathroom," Tyler whispered, his voice barely audible, and he ran from the room before any of us could stop him. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma was staring at her plate, clearly uncomfortable with the tension she didn't understand. Jake was looking at his mother with an expression that suggested even at 12, he knew she'd crossed a line. David was shaking his head slowly, disappointment written all over his face. But Rachel, she just sat there with that same cold smile, like she'd accomplished exactly what she'd set out to do. Like she'd finally said what she'd been thinking all along, and felt relieved to have it out in the open. "How could you?" Marcus asked his sister, his voice barely controlled. "How could you say something like that to Tyler? He's 8 years old, Rachel. He's a child." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Rachel replied with a shrug. "The boy doesn't fit, Marcus. Anyone with eyes can see that. I'm not being cruel, I'm being honest." That's when something snapped inside me. I stood up so fast my chair nearly toppled over, my hands shaking with rage and protective fury. "Honest?" I hissed. You call traumatizing a child honest? You call questioning his place in his own family honest? It's not his family, though, is it? Rachel shot back, dropping all pretense of sweetness. It's my family, Sarah. My brother, my bloodline, my legacy. And that child upstairs is a constant reminder that Marcus settled for someone else's leftovers. The gasp that escaped David's lips was audible. Even Emma and Jake were staring at their mother now with expressions of shock and horror. Marcus looked like he'd been punched in the gut, his face cycling through disbelief, hurt, and growing anger. But I felt strangely calm all of a sudden, like Rachel had finally revealed her true self, and I no longer had to pretend to tolerate her barely concealed hostility. You know what, Rachel? You're right about one thing. Tyler doesn't belong here. Not because he's not Marcus's biological son, but because he deserves better than to be around someone who would use a child's insecurities as a weapon. I turned to Marcus, who was still staring at his sister like he was seeing her for the first time. We're leaving. Get Tyler. We're going home. As I walked toward the stairs to find my son, I could hear Marcus's voice behind me, quiet but firm. Rachel, I don't know who you've become, but this isn't the sister I grew up with. What you just did is unforgivable. I found Tyler in the upstairs bathroom, sitting on the closed toilet seat with tears streaming down his face. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes, so full of hurt and confusion, and asked the question that shattered my heart into a million pieces. Mom, does Dad Marcus really want me? Or is he just pretending because he loves you? I knelt down in front of him and took his small hands in mine, looking directly into his eyes. Tyler Michael Mitchell, I said, using his full name to make sure he understood the gravity of what I was about to say. Your dad Marcus chose you, not because he had to, not because I asked him to, but because he wanted to. He adopted you because he couldn't imagine his life without you in it. You are his son in every way that matters, and no one, not even Aunt Rachel, gets to question that. But I don't look like him, Tyler whispered. Everyone can see that. Sweetheart, families aren't about looking alike. They're about loving each other, supporting each other, choosing each other every single day. Your dad Marcus looks at you and sees his son, his pride and joy, his future. That's what matters. Tyler nodded slowly, wiping his nose on his sleeve, and I helped him wash his face before we headed downstairs. Marcus was waiting for us at the bottom of the stairs, his expression grim but determined. He immediately scooped Tyler up in a bear hug, holding him tight. Tyler, I need you to listen to me very carefully, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. You are my son. You will always be my son. Nothing anyone says can change that. Do you understand me? Tyler nodded against Marcus's shoulder, and I saw Rachel watching from the dining room doorway, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought I saw something that might have been regret flicker across her face, but it was gone so quickly. I might have imagined it. We left without another word, Tyler falling asleep in the car on the way home, emotionally exhausted from the evening's trauma. Marcus and I didn't talk much that night, both of us processing what had happened. Both of us trying to figure out how to protect Tyler from any future attacks on his sense of belonging. But as I tucked Tyler into bed that night, smoothing his hair back from his forehead and whispering how much his dad and I loved him, I made a silent promise. Rachel had underestimated the lengths a mother would go to protect her child. She thought she could plant seeds of doubt and watch them grow in Tyler's mind, slowly poisoning his confidence and his sense of security. What she didn't know was that I had something she didn't expect. Something that would turn her attack into Tyler's greatest moment of triumph. Something that would not only prove Tyler's place in our family beyond any shadow of doubt, but would also give him the confidence to never question his worth again. The next morning would bring revelations that would change everything, and Rachel's cruel words would end up being the catalyst for Tyler's most empowering moment. Sometimes the people who try to tear us down end up being the very ones who force us to discover just how strong we really are. The drive home that night felt like we were carrying broken glass in our chests. Tyler had fallen asleep in the back seat, his tear-stained cheeks pressed against the window, and Marcus gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Neither of us spoke for the first 10 minutes, both processing the magnitude of what had just happened at Rachel's dinner table. "I can't believe she said that," Marcus finally whispered, his voice raw with hurt and disbelief. "I can't believe my own sister would attack Tyler like that, in front of everyone." I stared out at the passing streetlights, my mind racing through years of subtle slights and passive-aggressive comments that had led to this moment. "She's been building up to this for years, Marcus. This wasn't some spontaneous outburst. This was calculated." "But why?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Tyler is the sweetest kid. He's never done anything to her. He calls her Aunt. Rachel, he makes her Mother's Day cards. He includes her in his prayers at night. Why would she want to hurt him?" The innocence in Marcus's question broke my heart because it showed how fundamentally good he was, how incapable he was of understanding the kind of petty cruelty that had driven his sister's behavior. "Because she's never accepted that your love for Tyler is real," I said quietly. "She's been waiting for you to get tired of playing dad to someone else's child. When that didn't happen, when you adopted him and made it legal and permanent, she realized she had to take more drastic action." Marcus pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine, but neither of us moved to get out of the car. Tyler was still sleeping, his small chest rising and falling peacefully, blissfully unaware that the adults in his life were struggling to make sense of an adult's inexplicable cruelty toward a child. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked. "How do we protect him from this? From her?" I had been asking myself the same question, and as I watched Tyler sleep, an idea began forming in my mind. "We prove her wrong," I said simply. "We prove that Tyler belongs in this family so definitively that neither he nor anyone else will ever question it again." Marcus looked at me with curiosity and hope. "How?" I smiled for the first time that evening, feeling a spark of determination ignite in my chest. "I have an idea. But first, we need to make sure Tyler knows he's safe, that he's loved, and that what happened tonight doesn't define his worth or his place in our family." We carried Tyler inside and tucked him into bed, both of us lingering in his doorway for a few extra minutes, watching him sleep with the protective intensity that only parents understand. Then we sat at our kitchen table with cups of coffee growing cold as I explained my plan to Marcus. "Before Tyler was born," I began, "I did one of those ancestry DNA tests. You know, the ones that trace your genetic background and connect you with relatives. I was curious about my family history since my grandparents had passed away without sharing much about our heritage." Marcus nodded, still not seeing where I was going with this. The test results were fascinating. I found out I have relatives I never knew about, connections to Ireland and Scotland that explained so much about my family's traditions. But more importantly, the test also stores your genetic information and can be used to establish biological relationships. Understanding began dawning on Marcus's face. Tyler's biological father may have walked away, but that doesn't mean Tyler doesn't have family on that side. What if we could find them? What if we could show Tyler that he comes from a lineage of incredible people, that his genetics tell a story of strength and resilience and achievement? What if we could prove that biology isn't about looking like the people who raise you, but about carrying forward the best qualities of all the people who came before you? Marcus was fully engaged now, leaning forward with excitement. "You think we could find Tyler's biological family through DNA? I think we could try. And even if we don't find specific relatives, we'll get detailed information about his ethnic background, his genetic predispositions, maybe even connections to historical figures or notable lineages. Imagine if Tyler could see that his DNA connects him to artists or writers or innovators, Imagine if he could understand that his differences aren't flaws, they're gifts. The more I talked, the more convinced I became that this was the right path. Rachel wants to make Tyler feel like an outsider because he doesn't fit her narrow definition of family. But what if we show him that family is so much bigger than just the people in one house? What if we show him that he carries the DNA of countless generations of survivors and dreamers and fighters? Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. When do we start? The next morning, I woke up before dawn with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Tyler was still sleeping, emotionally exhausted from the previous evening, so I used the quiet morning hours to research everything I could about genetic genealogy and DNA testing for children. I wanted to make sure I understood the process completely before involving Tyler, and I wanted to have a plan for how to present this adventure to him in a way that felt exciting rather than clinical. By the time Tyler shuffled into the kitchen for breakfast, I had ordered the DNA test kit and had pages of information printed out about tracing family histories. Tyler looked subdued, picking at his cereal and avoiding eye contact. "How are you feeling this morning, sweetheart?" I asked gently, sitting down beside him at the kitchen table. Tyler shrugged, swirling his spoon through his cereal without taking a bite. "I had bad dreams," he admitted quietly. "I dreamed that Dad Marcus decided he didn't want me anymore because I don't look like him." My heart clenched, but I kept my voice steady and reassuring. "Tyler, look at me." He raised his eyes to meet mine, and I saw the vulnerability there, the fear that Rachel had planted with her cruel words. "Your dad Marcus loves you completely and forever. Nothing will ever change that. Do you know why?" Tyler shook his head. "Because love isn't about DNA or looks or blood. Love is about choice. Every single day your dad Marcus chooses to be your father. Every morning when he makes your lunch for school, he's choosing you. Every evening when he helps with your homework, he's choosing you. Every weekend when he takes you to baseball practice, he's choosing you. That's what real family is, Tyler. It's choosing each other, over and over again." Tyler nodded slowly, and I could see him processing this idea, trying to let it sink in deep enough to counter Rachel's poisonous words. "But you know what?" I continued, pulling out some of the papers I'd printed. "I think it might be fun to learn more about where you come from. Not because it matters more than the family we've built together, but because every person has an amazing story written in their genes, and I bet yours is incredible." Tyler's curiosity was piqued, despite his lingering sadness. "What do you mean?" I showed him pictures of DNA strands and family trees, explaining in 8-year-old terms how every person carries genetic information from hundreds of ancestors stretching back through history. "What if we could find out if you're related to any famous artists, since you're so talented at drawing? What if we could discover that your great-great-great-grandmother was a famous writer, or that you have DNA connections to explorers who discovered new lands?" Tyler's eyes were getting brighter as I talked, his natural curiosity overriding his sadness. "Could we really find out stuff like that?" "We can try," I said. "There's a special test that looks at your DNA and tells you all sorts of amazing things about your family history. And the best part is, no matter what we discover, it's just going to be extra cool information about you. It doesn't change the fact that you're Tyler Mitchell, son of Marcus and Sarah Mitchell, and nothing in the world could make us love you any less." When Marcus came down for breakfast, Tyler was practically bouncing in his chair with excitement about becoming a DNA detective. Marcus caught my eye over Tyler's head and smiled, understanding immediately that this was exactly what our son needed, a way to transform Rachel's attack into an adventure of self-discovery. The DNA test kit arrived 2 days later, and Tyler treated the whole process like the most exciting science experiment of his life. We swabbed his cheek, sealed the sample in the special container, and mailed it off to the lab. The waiting period was supposed to be 6 to 8 weeks, but Tyler asked about it every single day. "When will we know about my DNA?" became his most frequently asked question. "Do you think I'm related to any astronauts? What if I have DNA from a king? Could my great-great-great-grandpa have been a pirate?" During those weeks of waiting, something beautiful happened. Tyler's focus shifted completely away from Rachel's cruel words and toward anticipation of discovering his genetic heritage. Instead of worrying about not looking like Marcus, he started wondering what amazing ancestors he might discover. Instead of feeling insecure about his differences, he started viewing them as clues to an exciting mystery. Marcus and I used this time to reinforce Tyler's sense of belonging in our immediate family, while also expanding his understanding of what family could mean. We started a family tradition of heritage nights, where we'd research different cultures and countries, cooking traditional foods and learning about customs and histories. Tyler loved these evenings, and they helped him understand that diversity within families was something to celebrate, not hide. We also made a point of including Tyler more intentionally in Mitchell family traditions, not to prove he belonged, but to make sure he felt completely integrated into every aspect of our family culture. Marcus taught Tyler how to make his grandmother's famous biscuit recipe, a tradition that had been passed down through Mitchell men for generations. Tyler learned the family's secret fishing spots and the stories behind each one. He memorized the Mitchell family motto that Marcus's grandfather had created: "Mitchell men stand up for what's right and protect the people they love." "I'm a Mitchell man," Tyler would say proudly, puffing out his chest, and Marcus would ruffle his hair and agree wholeheartedly. During this waiting period, we had minimal contact with Rachel. Marcus had made it clear to his sister that she owed Tyler an apology, and until she was ready to make amends, she wasn't welcome around our family. Rachel, predictably, doubled down on her position, telling Marcus that she had only spoken the truth and that he was being manipulated by his wife. The rift between Marcus and his sister was painful for him, but he never wavered in his support for Tyler and his anger over Rachel's behavior. "I don't know who she's become," he told me one evening after a particularly unpleasant phone call with Rachel. "The sister I grew up with would never have attacked a child like that. She would have protected Tyler, not tried to destroy his confidence." "People sometimes reveal who they really are when they feel threatened," I replied. "Maybe Rachel always had this capacity for cruelty, and Tyler's place in your life just brought it to the surface." Meanwhile, Tyler was thriving in ways that had nothing to do with the impending DNA results. His confidence was growing daily, partly because of the excitement of the genetic testing, but mostly because Marcus and I were being more intentional about affirming his place in our family. We talked more openly about adoption and blended families, normalizing the idea that families come in all different configurations and that love is what makes a family real, not genetics. Tyler started talking about the DNA test at school, which led to fascinating conversations with his classmates about their own family backgrounds. His teacher, Mrs. Henderson, was so intrigued by Tyler's project that she incorporated genealogy into the class curriculum, having all the students research their family histories and present them to the class. Tyler's presentation was scheduled for the week after his DNA results were supposed to arrive, and he was determined to include his genetic findings in his family history report. "I want to show everyone all the cool stuff about my DNA," he told us excitedly, "and I want to explain how families can be built in different ways but still be completely real." The wisdom coming out of my 8-year-old son's mouth amazed me daily. Rachel's attempt to make him feel insecure about his place in our family had backfired spectacularly, turning Tyler into a confident advocate for diverse family structures and genetic heritage. 6 weeks after we sent off Tyler's DNA sample, I got an email notification that his results were ready. I was at work when the email arrived, and I spent the rest of the day distracted with anticipation. Tyler had been waiting for this moment for weeks, and I wanted the results to be everything he hoped they would be. That evening, we made it a family event. Marcus picked up Tyler's favorite pizza, I made a special dessert, and we all gathered around the computer in our living room to access Tyler's genetic profile together. Tyler was practically vibrating with excitement, bouncing on the couch cushions as I logged into the testing website. The first page that loaded was a colorful map showing Tyler's ethnic breakdown. His eyes went wide as he saw the different colors representing various geographic regions and ethnic backgrounds. "Look!" Tyler shouted, pointing at the screen. "I'm from everywhere!" According to the results, Tyler's genetic background was beautifully diverse. He had significant Irish and Scottish heritage, which explained his artistic tendencies and love of storytelling. There was English ancestry that connected him to a long line of craftsmen and builders, Spanish DNA that traced back to explorers and adventurers. Even a small percentage of Native American heritage that linked him to indigenous tribes known for their connection to nature and their warrior spirits. But the most exciting discovery was yet to come. The DNA testing site had a feature that connected users with genetic matches, people who shared DNA and were likely relatives. Tyler had dozens of matches, ranging from distant cousins to closer relatives he'd never known existed. One match in particular caught my attention. A woman named Patricia Donovan had a high percentage of DNA in common with Tyler, suggesting she was a close relative, possibly a great-aunt or second cousin. Her profile indicated she was a genealogy enthusiast who had researched her family extensively and had uploaded detailed family trees and historical information. I sent Patricia a message through the website explaining that Tyler was my adopted son and that we were trying to learn more about his biological heritage. I was honest about our situation, mentioning that Tyler's biological father had not been involved in his life and that we were simply trying to give Tyler a fuller picture of his genetic background. Patricia responded within hours, and her message made me cry with happiness. She was indeed Tyler's great-aunt, his biological father's aunt, and she had been wondering about Tyler for years. She explained that Tyler's biological father, whose name was Connor, had mentioned Tyler's existence to the family before disappearing from their lives as well. But here's what made Patricia's message so incredible. Connor's family had a rich history of artists, writers, and innovators. Tyler's biological great-grandfather had been a renowned sculptor whose work was displayed in museums. His great-great-grandmother had been one of the first female journalists in her city. There were teachers and inventors and musicians scattered throughout Tyler's genetic family tree. Even more amazingly, Patricia had boxes of family photos, documents, and heirlooms that she'd been saving, hoping someday to connect with Connor's son. She lived only 2 states away and was eager to meet Tyler and share his biological family's history with him. As I read Patricia's message aloud to Marcus and Tyler, I watched my son's face transform with wonder and pride. This wasn't just genetic information. This was a whole new branch of family that welcomed him with open arms and celebrated his existence. "She wants to meet me?" Tyler asked, his voice filled with awe. "She's been hoping to meet you for years," I confirmed. "And she has pictures of your great-grandfather's sculptures and stories about all these amazing people you're related to." Tyler looked at Marcus with a mixture of excitement and concern. "Is it okay if I want to meet her? You're still my real dad, right?" Marcus pulled Tyler into a hug, his voice thick with emotion. "Tyler, I will always be your dad, no matter how many other people love you. Family isn't about choosing sides, buddy. It's about having more people who care about you. And it sounds like Patricia has been waiting a long time to love you too." That night, as we tucked Tyler into bed, he was still buzzing with excitement about his DNA results and the prospect of meeting Patricia. "Mom," he said as I was turning off his bedroom light, "I can't wait to tell Aunt Rachel about all my cool DNA stuff. Maybe when she sees how awesome my biological family is, she'll stop being mean about me not looking like Dad Marcus." I sat back down on the edge of his bed, my heart breaking a little at his continued hope for Rachel's acceptance. "Tyler, Sweetheart, you don't need to prove anything to Aunt Rachel. Your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions of you. I know, Tyler said with the confident wisdom of a child who had been well loved. But maybe if she understands that. I come from cool people too. She'll see that I'm not just some random kid who doesn't belong. Maybe she'll see that I bring good stuff to the family too. As I kissed Tyler goodnight, I realized that my son had learned something profound from this entire experience. He had discovered that his identity wasn't dependent on one person's acceptance or rejection. He had learned that he carried within him the legacy of multiple generations of remarkable people, and that his differences were actually gifts that added richness to our family, rather than problems to be solved. Rachel's cruel words, intended to make Tyler feel small and unwanted, had instead launched him on a journey of self-discovery that had made him more confident and secure than ever before. Tomorrow, we would call Patricia and begin planning a meeting that would give Tyler even more reasons to be proud of who he was and where he came from. Sometimes the people who try to diminish us end up being the catalysts for our greatest discoveries about ourselves. Rachel had no idea that her attack on Tyler would lead to him finding an entire family of artists and innovators who would celebrate his unique gifts and welcome him with open hearts. The phone call with Patricia Donovan changed everything. When Tyler heard her warm, grandmother-like voice for the first time, telling him she'd been praying to meet him since he was born, he broke into the biggest smile I'd seen since before. Rachel's devastating dinner comment. Patricia had a way of speaking that made Tyler feel instantly cherished, like he was a long-lost treasure she'd finally found. "Tyler, honey," Patricia said during that first conversation, her voice crackling through the speakerphone. "I have been waiting 8 years to tell you about your incredible heritage. Did you know that your great-great-grandmother, Elena Rodriguez, was the first woman in our county to own her own business? She started with nothing but a sewing machine and built an empire of 3 dress shops that clothed half the women in town for weddings and special occasions." Tyler's eyes grew wide with fascination. Really? She made dresses? Not just dresses, sweetheart. She designed them. She was an artist with fabric, just like you're an artist with your drawings. And your great-grandfather James? Oh my goodness. He could build anything with his hands. Furniture, houses, even intricate wooden toys. For all the children in the neighborhood. He once carved an entire chess set so detailed that people came from 3 towns over just to see it. As Patricia continued sharing stories, I watched Tyler's posture change. His shoulders straightened, his chin lifted slightly, and that defeated slouch he'd carried since Rachel's attack completely disappeared. He was discovering that he didn't just belong to our family, he belonged to generations of creative, innovative, resilient people who had overcome challenges and made their mark on the world. "And Tyler," Patricia continued, "I have photographs, boxes and boxes of them. Pictures of James in his workshop, Elena in front of her dress shops, your great-uncle Miguel who became a teacher and helped build the first library in his town. I have letters they wrote, recipes Elena created, even some of James's sketches for his woodworking projects." "You saved all of that?" Tyler asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Honey, I've been the family historian for 40 years. I knew someday these treasures would find their way to the right person. I just never imagined that person would be an 8-year-old boy who needed to know how special his bloodline really is." We made plans for Patricia to visit the following weekend. She lived in Colorado, about a 6-hour drive from our home in Texas, but she insisted she'd make the trip. "I've been waiting 8 years to hug my great-great-nephew," she said. "A little drive isn't going to stop me now." The week leading up to Patricia's visit was transformative for Tyler. Every day he'd ask me to call her so he could hear more stories about his biological family's history. Patricia seemed to have an endless supply of fascinating tales about Tyler's ancestors, and each one reinforced the message that Tyler came from a long line of people who had faced challenges with creativity, determination, and grace. Tyler learned that his great-great-great-grandfather had been a journalist who had traveled across the country documenting the stories of immigrant families building new lives in America. His great-aunt had been a nurse who had volunteered during natural disasters, traveling wherever she was needed to help people heal. There were artists and teachers, builders and healers, storytellers and innovators scattered throughout Tyler's genetic family tree. But more importantly, Patricia had a way of connecting Tyler's current interests and talents to his ancestral heritage. When Tyler mentioned his love of drawing, she told him about 3 different relatives who had been visual artists. When he talked about wanting to help animals, she shared stories about his great-uncle who had become a veterinarian and had treated farm animals for families who couldn't afford to pay. It's like these talents and interests are woven into your DNA, sweetheart, Patricia told him during one of their evening phone calls. You're not just Tyler Mitchell, though. That's a wonderful name and a wonderful family. You're also Tyler, descendant of Elena the dress designer, James the master craftsman, Miguel the educator, and Rosa the nurse. You carry all of their gifts inside you. Marcus was initially worried that Tyler's excitement about his biological heritage might make him feel less connected to the Mitchell family. But the opposite happened. The more secure Tyler felt about his genetic background, the more confidently he embraced his identity as a Mitchell. It was as if learning about his biological family had given him the foundation he needed to fully appreciate the family that had chosen him. Dad, Marcus, Tyler said one evening as Marcus was helping him with homework, Patricia told me that my great-grandfather James always said that the most important thing wasn't where you came from, but who you chose to become, and who you chose to love. That sounds like something a Mitchell would say, doesn't it? Marcus smiled, ruffling Tyler's hair affectionately. That sounds exactly like something a Mitchell would say, buddy. Looks like you were meant to be part of our family in more ways than one. The night before Patricia's arrival, Tyler could barely sleep. He had prepared a special art portfolio to show her, including drawings he'd made inspired by the stories she'd shared about their family. He'd drawn Elena at her sewing machine, James in his woodworking shop, and Miguel teaching children in a one-room schoolhouse. Each drawing was accompanied by a handwritten note explaining what he'd learned about that ancestor and how their story made him feel proud to be connected to them. When Patricia's car pulled into our driveway that Saturday morning, Tyler was pressed against the front window, watching eagerly. The woman who emerged from the car was exactly what I'd imagined from her warm phone presence, a silver-haired lady in her 70s with kind eyes and arms that looked like they were made for, giving the best hugs in the world. Tyler ran to her before she'd even reached our front porch, and Patricia swept him up in an embrace that seemed to heal something deep inside him. "Oh, my sweet boy," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You look exactly like your great-grandfather James did at your age. Same thoughtful eyes, same gentle spirit." For the next 3 hours, Patricia spread photographs, documents, and family heirlooms across our dining room table, creating a visual timeline of Tyler's heritage that stretched back 5 generations. Tyler sat beside her, absorbing every detail, asking questions about each relative and marveling at the family resemblances Patricia pointed out. "See this photograph of Elena?" Patricia said, holding up a sepia-toned picture of a young woman standing proudly in front of a dress shop. "Look at her hands. She has the same long artistic fingers that you do, Tyler. And look at this picture of James with one of his wooden sculptures. See how he holds his carving tools? You hold your art pencils the exact same way." Tyler studied the photographs intently, seeing himself reflected in ancestors he'd never known existed. But the most powerful moment came when Patricia opened a wooden box that had belonged to James and revealed a collection of his original sketches and design plans. James documented every project he worked on, Patricia explained, carefully handling the aged papers. These are his original drawings for furniture pieces, architectural plans for houses he built, even sketches of toys he made for his grandchildren. He was an artist first, a craftsman second, just like you. Tyler's eyes widened as he looked at detailed drawings that could have come from a professional architect or designer. The similarity between James's artistic style and Tyler's own natural drawing ability was unmistakable. "He drew like me," Tyler whispered in amazement. "No, sweetheart," Patricia corrected gently. "You draw like him. This gift has been passed down through 5 generations, waiting for you to carry it forward." Patricia had brought something else, something she'd been saying for last. From her largest bag, she pulled out a leather-bound journal with James Mitchell Rodriguez embossed on the cover. This was James's personal journal, she explained. He wrote in it every day for 40 years, documenting not just his work, but his thoughts about family, about overcoming challenges, about what it means to leave a legacy for the people who come after you. She opened the journal to a page she'd marked with a ribbon. "There's something in here I think you need to hear, Tyler." James wrote this entry when he was facing criticism from people who didn't think a man with his background should be designing homes for wealthy families. Some people questioned whether he belonged in that world, whether he was good enough. Tyler leaned forward, his full attention focused on Patricia as she began to read from James's journal in her clear, strong voice. "Today, a man told me I didn't belong in his neighborhood, that someone like me couldn't possibly understand what quality craftsmanship means. He looked at my hands, my clothes, my accent, and decided I wasn't worthy of building his family's home. But I know something he doesn't know. I know that my worth isn't determined by other people's limited vision. I know that I carry within me the skills and dreams and determination of everyone who came before me. When people try to make me feel small, I remember that I am the son of dreamers, the grandson of survivors, the great-grandson of people who crossed oceans to build better lives for children they would never meet. I belong wherever I choose to make my mark, and I will build beautiful things not to prove them wrong, but to honor the gifts I've been given and to create something lasting for the generations who will come after me." The room was completely silent as Patricia finished reading. Tyler sat perfectly still, processing the profound connection between his great-great-great-grandfather's experience and his own recent struggles with belonging and acceptance. "Tyler," Patricia said softly, closing the journal and placing it in his hands, "James would want you to have this. He would want you to know that questioning your place in the world isn't weakness, it's human. But letting other people's doubts become your truth, that's the only real failure." Tyler held the journal reverently, running his fingers over the worn leather cover. "Can I really keep this?" "It belongs to you now," Patricia confirmed. "You're the next artist in the family line. James's journal is yours to read whenever you need, reminding of who you are and what you're capable of." That afternoon, Patricia helped Tyler create his own family heritage presentation for school. Together, they organized the photographs, documents, and stories into a comprehensive display that showcased not just Tyler's genetic background, but the values and achievements that ran through his family line. Patricia also helped Tyler write a personal statement explaining what he'd learned about identity, belonging, and the difference between being accepted by others and accepting yourself. "The most important thing you can remember, Tyler," Patricia said as they worked on his presentation, "is that you don't need anyone's permission to take up space in this world. You don't need to prove your worthiness to people who have already decided not to see your value. You just need to live fully into who you are and let your light shine so brightly that it illuminates the path for other people who are struggling to find their place." As Patricia prepared to leave the next morning, she had one final surprise for Tyler. From her car, she retrieved a large canvas bag that she'd kept hidden during her entire visit. "This belonged to Elena," she said, opening the bag to reveal an antique sewing machine in pristine condition. "She used this to create her most beautiful dresses. I've been storing it for decades, waiting for the right person to inherit it. I originally thought it would go to one of the girls in the family, but after meeting you, Tyler, I know Elena would want her sewing machine to go to the family artist, regardless of gender. Tyler's eyes filled with tears as he touched the intricate metalwork on the vintage machine. "But I don't know how to sew." Patricia smiled. Elena didn't know how to sew when she first got this machine either. She learned by doing, by experimenting, by not being afraid to make mistakes. This machine isn't just about sewing, Tyler. It's about creating, about taking raw materials and turning them into something beautiful and useful. That's what artists do, whether they're working with fabric, wood, paint, or pencils. That evening, after Patricia had driven back to Colorado, Tyler sat at his desk with James's journal open beside him, working on a drawing inspired by all the stories he'd learned about his heritage. Marcus found him there at bedtime, carefully, sketching what looked like a family tree, but instead of names and circles, Tyler was drawing small portraits of each ancestor Patricia had told him about. "That's beautiful, buddy," Marcus said, admiring Tyler's artwork. "Tell me about it." "It's my heritage tree," Tyler explained proudly. "Patricia told me that families are like trees, with roots that go deep and branches that spread wide. She said I'm like a branch that connects two different parts of the tree, the Mitchell side and the biological side. And that makes me extra strong because I get nutrients from lots of different roots." Marcus sat down beside Tyler, moved by his son's mature understanding of complex family dynamics. "That's a perfect way to think about it, Tyler. You're not half of anything. You're double everything. You get to carry forward the best parts of multiple family legacies." "Dad, Marcus," Tyler said, setting down his pencil and looking at his father seriously. "I want to show Aunt Rachel my heritage presentation. Not because I need her to approve of me, but because I want her to understand that I'm not taking anything away from the Mitchell family. I'm adding to it." The wisdom and confidence in Tyler's voice amazed me. In the span of just a few weeks, he had transformed from a child questioning his worth to a young person who understood his value and was ready to advocate for himself with grace and strength. "Are you sure you're ready for that, Tyler?" Marcus asked gently. "Aunt Rachel might not respond the way you're hoping." Tyler nodded firmly. "Patricia told me that James always said the best way to handle people who try to make you feel small is to show them how big you really are. Not in a mean way, but in a way that helps them see what they were missing." 2 days later, Tyler gave his heritage presentation at school, and according to Mrs. Henderson, it was the most comprehensive and moving family history project she'd seen in her 20 years of teaching. Tyler had woven together his genetic heritage and his adopted family story into a powerful narrative about identity, resilience, and the many different ways families are formed. His classmates were fascinated by the photographs and artifacts Patricia had shared, but they were even more impressed by Tyler's confident presentation style and his mature insights about family and belonging. Several students approached Tyler after his presentation to share their own stories about adoption, step-families, and complex family structures. That evening, Tyler announced that he was ready to call Aunt Rachel and invite her to a special family dinner, where he would share his heritage presentation with the Mitchell family. Marcus and I exchanged glances, both proud of Tyler's courage, and concerned about potential disappointment if Rachel responded poorly. But Tyler was determined. "I know who I am now," he said with quiet confidence. "I know where I come from, I know where I belong, and I know what I have to offer. Aunt Rachel can choose to celebrate that with us or not, but either way, I'm going to be okay." As I watched my 8-year-old son pick up the phone to call the woman who had tried to destroy his sense of belonging, I realized that Rachel's cruel attack had backfired in the most beautiful way possible. Instead of making Tyler question his place in our family, she had launched him on a journey of self-discovery that had made him more confident, more secure, and more proud of his complex identity than ever before. Tyler had learned that he didn't need anyone's permission to belong, and that knowledge would serve him well for the rest of his life. Tomorrow, we would discover whether Rachel had learned anything during the week since her devastating dinner table attack. But regardless of Her response, Tyler was ready to stand tall in his truth. Tyler's phone call to Rachel was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed from my 8-year-old son. Gone was the hesitant, hurt child from that devastating dinner weeks ago. In his place sat a young person who had discovered his own worth and was ready to share it with the world, regardless of how others chose to receive it. "Hi, Aunt Rachel," Tyler said when she answered, his voice steady and warm. "It's Tyler. I wanted to invite you to a special family dinner this Saturday because I have something really exciting to share with everyone." I could hear Rachel's surprised silence through the phone, followed by her cautious response. "Oh, Tyler. Hello, sweetheart. What kind of something?" "I did a heritage project for school about my family history, and I discovered some amazing things about where I come from. I thought you might like to see it since you were curious about my background." The maturity in Tyler's approach took my breath away. He wasn't confrontational or defensive. He wasn't seeking an apology or trying to make Rachel feel guilty. He was simply offering to share something meaningful with her, treating her interest in his genetics as genuine curiosity rather than cruel attack. "Well," Rachel said slowly, "I suppose I could come to dinner on Saturday." "Great," Tyler replied with genuine enthusiasm. "Mom's making her famous lasagna, and I'll set up my presentation in the living room. I think you're going to be really surprised by what I found out about my DNA family." After Tyler hung up, Marcus shook his head in amazement. "I can't believe how you handled that, buddy. You were so confident and gracious." Tyler shrugged, as if his newfound wisdom was the most natural thing in the world. "Patricia told me that when people are mean to you, it usually means they're scared or confused about something. Maybe Aunt Rachel was scared that I was going to take something away from the Mitchell family. Now I can show her that I'm actually bringing something special to add to it." The days leading up to the dinner were filled with preparation. Tyler organized his heritage presentation materials with the precision of a professional curator, creating detailed displays that showcased not just his genetic background, but the values and achievements that connected his biological heritage to his Mitchell family identity. He had arranged Patricia's photographs chronologically, creating a timeline that showed 5 generations of artists, innovators, and community builders. Beside each photograph, he had written brief biographies that highlighted the character traits and accomplishments of each ancestor. But the most impressive part of his presentation was a large poster board where he had drawn connections between his biological heritage and his Mitchell family values. "Look, Mom," Tyler said, showing me his comparison chart. "Great-great-grandma Elena started her own business even when people said women couldn't be entrepreneurs. That's just like how Dad Marcus started his own construction company even when everyone said he was too young. And great-great-grandpa James built beautiful things with his hands, just like how Grandpa Mitchell taught Dad Marcus to work with wood." Tyler had identified dozens of connections between his 2 family lines, showing how the values of creativity, determination, community service, and resilience appeared in both his genetic heritage and his adoptive family culture. What could have been a presentation about differences had become a celebration of shared values and complementary strengths. The most powerful element of Tyler's presentation was a section he called "What I Bring to the Mitchell Family." Using everything he'd learned from Patricia about his ancestors, Tyler had created a list of the gifts and perspectives he contributed to our family unit. "From Elena, I bring artistic vision and entrepreneurial spirit," Tyler had written in his careful 8-year-old handwriting. "From James, I bring attention to detail and the ability to build beautiful things. From Miguel, I bring a love of learning and teaching others. From Rosa, I bring compassion and the desire to help people heal. These aren't things that take away from being a Mitchell. These are things that make me a better Mitchell." Saturday arrived with an unusual sense of anticipation. Tyler woke up early and spent extra time getting ready, choosing his favorite button-down shirt and combing his hair carefully. "I want to look professional for my presentation," he explained, and I marveled at how this experience had transformed him from a child seeking approval to a young person taking pride in sharing his achievements. Marcus and I had decided to invite my mother and Tyler's teacher, Mrs. Henderson, to the dinner as well. Mrs. Henderson had been so impressed with Tyler's school presentation that she'd asked if she could see the complete family heritage project. And Tyler was thrilled to have an audience that truly appreciated his work. Rachel arrived exactly on time, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing an expression I couldn't quite read. She hugged Tyler when she walked in, and I noticed she held the embrace a moment longer than usual, as if she was seeing him differently than she had before. "Tyler tells me you have quite a presentation prepared," Rachel said as we gathered in the living room before dinner. "I do," Tyler replied enthusiastically. "I found out so many cool things about my DNA family, and I think you're going to be really interested in some of the connections I discovered." Tyler's presentation lasted nearly an hour, but every person in that room was completely captivated. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had done thorough research and was passionate about his subject matter. He shared stories about his ancestors with pride and joy, painting vivid pictures of Elena's dress shop empire, James's masterful woodworking, Miguel's dedication to education, and Rosa's healing touch. But the moment that changed everything came when Tyler reached the section about family connections. He pulled out a large family tree diagram that showed how his biological heritage and Mitchell heritage created intersecting circles of shared values. "Aunt Rachel," Tyler said, looking directly at her with clear, confident eyes, "you asked me if I was sure I belonged in this family. I want to show you why the answer is yes, but maybe not for the reasons you were thinking about." Tyler proceeded to explain how his genetic heritage had actually prepared him to be an excellent Mitchell family member. He showed how Elena's entrepreneurial spirit matched the Mitchell family tradition of starting their own businesses. He demonstrated how James's craftsmanship connected to the Mitchell family's pride in working with their hands. He explained how Miguel's commitment to education aligned with the Mitchell family's emphasis on helping others learn and grow. "The DNA test didn't just tell me about my biological family," Tyler continued. "It helped me understand why I fit so well into the Mitchell family. It's like I was genetically programmed to appreciate the same values that make our family special." Rachel was listening intently, her expression shifting from skeptical to surprised to something that looked almost like wonder. When Tyler reached the section about what he brought to the Mitchell family, her eyes began to fill with tears. "From my DNA family, I learned that being different isn't a problem to be solved," Tyler said, reading from his carefully prepared notes. "It's a gift to be shared. I don't look like Dad Marcus, and that's actually a good thing, because it means I can help other kids who don't look like their adoptive parents feel okay about being different too." Tyler then shared something that made everyone in the room emotional. He had written a letter to his biological father, not to send, but to process his feelings about genetics and family and belonging. With permission from Marcus and me, he read portions of that letter aloud. "Dear Connor," Tyler read, "I don't know where you are or why you left, but I want you to know that I'm okay. I want you to know that the DNA you gave me has been put to good use. I'm using Elena's artistic gifts to create beautiful things. I'm using James's attention to detail to excel in school. I'm using Miguel's love of learning to explore the world with curiosity. I'm using Rosa's compassion to be kind to other people who feel different or left out." Tyler paused, looking around the room at the tearful faces of the adults who loved him. "But most importantly, I want you to know that your DNA found the perfect home. The Mitchell family doesn't just accept my differences, they celebrate them. They don't just tolerate my biological heritage, they encourage me to explore it and be proud of it. So thank you for giving me genes that prepared me to be the best Mitchell I could possibly be." When Tyler finished his letter, the room was completely silent except for the sound of tissues being pulled from boxes. Rachel was openly crying, her carefully composed facade completely dissolved. "Tyler," Rachel said, her voice shaking with emotion, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life." Tyler looked at her with the wisdom of someone much older than his 8 years. "You don't owe me an apology, Aunt Rachel. You were worried about protecting the Mitchell family, and that's actually really nice. But now you can see that I'm not a threat to our family, I'm an addition to it." Rachel stood up and walked over to where Tyler was standing beside his presentation materials. She knelt down so she was at his eye level and took his hands in hers. "Tyler, when I said those horrible things at dinner, I was scared. I was scared that if Marcus loved you as much as a biological son, it would somehow mean he loved the rest of us less. I was scared that our family traditions and values might get diluted if we included people who came from different backgrounds." Tyler listened carefully, his expression serious but not angry. "But what you've shown me today," Rachel continued, "is that love doesn't get divided when it's shared with more people. It gets multiplied. And you haven't diluted our family values. You've strengthened them by bringing your own special gifts to add to what we already had." Rachel pulled Tyler into a hug that seemed to heal years of tension and misunderstanding. "I was wrong, Tyler. I was so wrong. You don't just belong in this family. You make this family better by being part of it." The transformation in the room was palpable. Mrs. Henderson was wiping away tears, clearly moved by witnessing a child's resilience triumph over adult prejudice. My mother was beaming with pride at her grandson's maturity and grace. Marcus looked like he might burst with love for both his son and his sister, who had finally seen what he'd known all along. But Tyler's response to Rachel's apology was what truly demonstrated how much he had grown during this entire experience. "Aunt Rachel," Tyler said gently, "I forgive you for what you said at dinner. But more importantly, I hope you can forgive yourself. Patricia told me that sometimes good people make mistakes when they're scared, and that doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them human." The wisdom flowing from my 8-year-old son left every adult in the room speechless. Tyler had not only defended himself with grace and dignity, he had extended compassion to the person who had attacked him. "There's one more thing I want to show you," Tyler said, walking over to Elena's antique sewing machine, which we had set up in the corner of the room as part of his heritage display. "This belonged to my great-great-great-grandmother Elena. Patricia gave it to me because she said Elena would want it to go to the family artist." Tyler ran his hands over the intricate metalwork, his touch reverent and careful. "I've been thinking about what I want to do with this machine. I know I'm only 8, so I can't use it yet, but I have a plan." He looked around the room at all the adults who were hanging on his every word. "I want to learn how to use Elena's sewing machine so I can make quilts. Not just any quilts, but special quilts that tell stories about families like ours. Families that are built in different ways but held together by love. I want to make quilts for other kids who are adopted, or who have step-parents, or who don't look like the people who raised them." Tyler's vision was so mature and beautiful that it took my breath away. "I want to use Elena's gift for creating beautiful things to help other kids feel proud of their complex families. And I want to teach other people how to make story quilts too, so we can spread the message that families come in all different shapes and sizes, and they're all beautiful." The impact of Tyler's words on everyone in the room was profound. Here was a child who had been attacked for not belonging, and his response was to dedicate his inherited artistic gifts to helping other children facing similar challenges. Rachel was crying again, but these were tears of pride and amazement rather than regret. "Tyler," she said, "that is the most beautiful project I've ever heard of, and if you need any help learning to use that sewing machine, I'd be honored to teach you. I learned to sew from your great-grandmother Mitchell, and I think she would love knowing that her sewing skills were being passed on to help you carry forward Elena's legacy." The evening concluded with Tyler receiving praise and encouragement from every adult present, but more importantly, with a family that had been fractured by misunderstanding and fear being rebuilt on a foundation of acceptance and celebration of differences. Over the following weeks, Tyler's confidence continued to grow in ways that extended far beyond his family relationships. His heritage project had given him a sense of identity and purpose that transformed how he approached challenges at school, friendships, and new experiences. Tyler started a diversity club at his elementary school, where students could share their family stories and cultural backgrounds. He became a peer mentor for other adopted children, helping them understand that their worth wasn't determined by their biological connections but by their character and contributions. Most remarkably, Tyler began working with a local quilting group to learn the skills he needed to bring his vision of story quilts to life. Rachel kept her promise and became his primary sewing instructor, and their weekly lessons became precious, bonding time that healed their relationship completely. 6 months after that transformative dinner presentation, Tyler completed his first story quilt. It depicted a tree with roots extending in multiple directions underground, representing different family origins, and branches reaching toward the sky in a unified canopy, representing how diverse backgrounds can create stronger, more beautiful family structures. Tyler donated his first quilt to the local adoption agency, where it hangs in the waiting room to encourage families considering adoption and children waiting for homes. The plaque beside the quilt reads, "Created by Tyler Mitchell, age 8, to celebrate the truth that families are built on love, not biology." The story of Tyler's transformation from a child questioning his belonging to a young advocate for family diversity spread throughout our community. He was invited to speak at adoption events, school assemblies, and community forums about tolerance and acceptance. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from Patricia, who flew in from Colorado to see Tyler's first story quilt in person. When she saw how he had woven together the artistic traditions of Elena with the craftsmanship values of the Mitchell family, she declared it the most beautiful expression of heritage integration she had ever witnessed. "Tyler," Patricia said as they stood together admiring his quilt, "Elena and James would be so proud to see how you've used their gifts. But more than that, they would be amazed to see how you've used the pain of someone questioning your belonging to create something that helps other people find their place in the world." Tyler looked up at Patricia with the confident smile that had become his trademark since discovering his heritage. That's what Patricia always said real strength is, right? Taking the hard things that happen to you and using them to make life better for other people. As I watched my son, now 9 years old, explaining his artistic process to visitors who came to see his story quilts, I marveled at the journey that had brought us to this point. Rachel's cruel question about Tyler's belonging had been intended to make him feel small and unwanted. Instead, it had launched him on a path of self-discovery that had made him a confident advocate for acceptance and inclusion. Tyler had learned that belonging isn't something other people give you. It's something you claim for yourself based on your understanding of your own worth. He had discovered that family isn't about looking alike or sharing DNA. It's about choosing to love and support each other through all of life's challenges and celebrations. Most importantly, Tyler had learned that our differences aren't obstacles to overcome, they're gifts to be shared. His unique perspective as an adopted child with a rich biological heritage and a loving chosen family had given him insights that he was now using to help other families navigate complex identity questions. The child who had once questioned whether he belonged anywhere had become a young person who helped others understand that they belong everywhere. They choose to plant roots of love, kindness, and contribution. Rachel never made another comment about Tyler not looking like Marcus. Instead, she became one of his biggest supporters, proudly telling anyone who would listen about her nephew, the artist advocate who was changing hearts and minds about what family really means. And Tyler? He grew up knowing exactly who he was, where he came from, and where he belonged. Not because someone else told him, but because he had discovered it for himself through a journey that transformed an attack on his identity into a celebration of his unique place in the world. Sometimes the people who try to make us question our worth end up being the catalysts for us, discovering just how valuable we really are. Tyler's story became a testament to the truth that our greatest strengths often emerge from our deepest challenges, and that belonging is not a gift others give us, but a truth we claim for ourselves. 3 years had passed since that life-changing dinner at Rachel's house, and Tyler, now 11 years old, had become something I never could have imagined when he was that hurt 8-year-old, questioning his place in our family. He had evolved into a young leader whose story had rippled far beyond our small Texas town, inspiring families across the country to embrace the beauty of diverse family structures. Tyler's Story Quilt project had grown from a personal healing journey into a nationwide movement. What started as one child's desire to help other adopted children feel proud of their complex identities had become the Threads of Belonging Foundation, a nonprofit organization that Tyler had helped establish with the support of adoption agencies, quilting communities, and family advocacy groups across America. Every month, Tyler received letters from children who had seen his quilts or heard his story. Letters from kids who didn't look like their adoptive parents, from children in foster care, from young people struggling with blended family dynamics, and from teenagers questioning their identity in families formed through surrogacy, remarriage, or international adoption. Each letter reinforced Tyler's growing understanding that his experience of questioning belonging was far more universal than he had initially realized. "Mom," Tyler said one morning over breakfast, showing me a letter from a 10-year-old girl in Oregon whose adoptive family was struggling with extended family acceptance. "I think we need to do something bigger than just making quilts. I think we need to create a place where families like ours can come together and support each other." Tyler's vision had expanded beyond individual art projects to encompass community building and systemic change. He had started corresponding with family therapists, adoption counselors, and child psychologists who were amazed by his mature insights into identity formation and belonging. Several professionals had asked Tyler to contribute to research studies about resilience in adopted children, and his perspectives were being incorporated into training materials for adoption professionals. The transformation in our own family had been equally remarkable. Rachel had become one of Tyler's most passionate advocates, using her position as a bank manager to sponsor financial literacy workshops for adoptive families and single parents. She had also started volunteering with the local adoption agency, sharing her story of transformation and helping other extended family members understand how to embrace children who joined their families through adoption. I was so focused on protecting what I thought was ours that I almost missed out on the gift Tyler brought to our family, Rachel told a group of prospective adoptive grandparents during one of her workshops. Now I realized that Tyler didn't diminish our family legacy. He expanded it. He brought new traditions, new perspectives, and new possibilities that made us stronger and more complete. Marcus had been profoundly changed by watching Tyler's journey as well. Seeing his son transform pain into purpose had inspired Marcus to become more involved in community service and mentorship. He had started volunteering with Big Brothers Big Sisters, specifically working with boys who were navigating complex family situations. Marcus brought Tyler to some of these mentoring sessions, where Tyler's story served as powerful proof that children could not only survive identity challenges, but emerge stronger and more confident. Tyler taught me that being a father isn't about biology or even about providing for your child's basic needs, Marcus told a group of prospective mentors. It's about helping your child discover their own strength and supporting them as they figure out how to use that strength to make the world better. But perhaps the most profound change had occurred in Tyler himself. The confident, articulate, young man who now spoke at conferences and led workshops bore little resemblance to the uncertain child who had once questioned his place at our dinner table. Tyler had developed an emotional intelligence and communication skills that amazed adults who worked with him. At 11, Tyler was already demonstrating leadership abilities that suggested he was destined for significant impact as he grew older. He had been invited to speak at the National Adoption Conference, where his presentation on transforming questions of belonging into celebrations of identity received a standing ovation from an audience of adoption professionals, parents, and adopted individuals. Tyler's speech at that conference had been particularly powerful because he had moved beyond just sharing his personal story to offering practical strategies for other families facing similar challenges. He had developed what he called the Heritage Integration Model, a framework for helping adopted children explore their biological backgrounds in ways that strengthened rather than threatened their relationships with their adoptive families. "The mistake people make," Tyler had told the conference audience with remarkable poise for an 11-year-old, "is thinking that genetics and chosen family are competing forces. But they're actually complementary gifts. My DNA gave me artistic abilities and curiosity and resilience. My adoptive family gave me unconditional love and opportunities and the confidence to use my gifts. Together, they made me who I am today." Tyler's heritage integration approach had been so well received that several adoption agencies had asked him to help develop educational materials for families beginning the adoption process. Working with child development specialists, Tyler had created age-appropriate resources that helped adoptive parents understand how to support their children's exploration of biological heritage while reinforcing the primacy of the chosen family relationship. The ripple effects of Tyler's story had reached far beyond the adoption community. His quilts had been displayed in museums and cultural centers as examples of contemporary folk art that addressed themes of identity, belonging, and family diversity. Art educators were using Tyler's story to teach students about using creative expression to process complex emotions and advocate for social change. Tyler had also become an unofficial spokesperson for the broader message that families are defined by love and commitment rather than biological connections. He had been featured in magazine articles about modern family structures, appeared on local television programs discussing resilience in children, and even had his story adapted into a children's book that was being used in schools to facilitate discussions about diversity and acceptance. But Tyler never let the attention and recognition go to his head. He remained grounded in his core mission of helping other children who were struggling with questions of identity and belonging. Every speaking engagement, every media interview, every artistic project was focused on that central goal of making other kids feel seen, valued, and secure in their family relationships. "The cool thing about my story," Tyler told a group of middle school students during a school assembly about diversity and inclusion, "is that it shows how something that was meant to hurt me actually became the thing that helped me discover my purpose." When someone tries to make you feel like you don't belong, that's your opportunity to prove how much you actually do belong and to help other people who are feeling the same way. Tyler's influence had extended to policy discussions as well. He had been invited to provide input on legislation related to adoption support services and had testified before a state legislative committee about the importance of funding programs that help adoptive families navigate complex identity issues. At 11 years old, Tyler was already making his voice heard in rooms where important decisions were being made about children's welfare. The testimony Tyler gave to the state legislature was particularly moving because he spoke not just as someone who had overcome challenges, but as someone who had transformed those challenges into a calling to serve others. He told the lawmakers about receiving letters from children across the country who were struggling with similar issues, and he explained how adequate support services could prevent the kind of identity crisis he had experienced. "Every child deserves to feel proud of their story," Tyler had told the legislators, "whether they're adopted, in foster care, part of a blended family, or any other family structure that doesn't fit the traditional model. When we invest in programs that help families navigate these complexities, we're not just helping individual children, we're creating future leaders who will use their experiences to make society more inclusive and compassionate." The committee was so impressed with Tyler's testimony that they increased funding for adoption support services by 30%, specifically citing Tyler's presentation as evidence of the positive outcomes that could result from adequate family support. Meanwhile, Tyler's academic performance had flourished as his confidence grew. He was consistently on the honor roll, had been accepted into the gifted and talented program at school, and was already taking high school-level art classes. His teachers frequently commented on his maturity, his empathy for other students, and his natural leadership abilities. Tyler had also developed close friendships with other children who had complex family stories. He had naturally gravitated toward kids who understood what it felt like to navigate questions about identity and belonging. And together they had formed a support network that strengthened all of them. These friendships had taught Tyler valuable lessons about the importance of community and mutual support. One of Tyler's closest friends was Maria, a girl whose parents had divorced when she was young and who struggled with feeling torn between two households. Another close friend was David, who had been adopted from another country and was working to maintain connections to his birth culture while fully embracing his American family. Tyler's friend group had become a mini laboratory for exploring how young people could honor multiple aspects of their identities without feeling conflicted or divided. "We call ourselves the Complex Family Club," Tyler had explained to me, one afternoon when several of his friends were over for a study session. "We figured out that all of us have families that are put together in interesting ways, and instead of feeling weird about it, we decided to feel awesome about it. We help each other figure out how to explain our families to people who don't understand, and we celebrate each other's differences." Watching Tyler navigate friendships with such wisdom and intention reinforced my understanding of how much he had grown during his journey of self-discovery. He had learned not just to accept his own complex identity, but to help others embrace theirs as well. Tyler's relationship with Patricia had also continued to deepen over the years. They maintained regular phone calls and visits, and Patricia had become like a beloved grandmother to Tyler. She continued to share stories and artifacts from his biological family's history, but more importantly, she had become a mentor who helped Tyler understand how to use his heritage as a source of strength and inspiration. "Tyler has taught me as much as I've taught him," Patricia told me during one of her visits. "Watching him take the gifts of his ancestors and use them to help other children has been the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. Elena and James would be so proud to see how their artistic legacy has been transformed into a tool for healing and empowerment." Patricia had also become involved in the Threads of Belonging Foundation, using her genealogy expertise to help other adopted children explore their biological heritage in healthy, empowering ways. She had developed workshops for adoptive families about how to support children's exploration of their genetic background without threatening the adoptive relationship. As Tyler approached his 12th birthday, he began talking about his long-term goals and the impact he wanted to have as he grew older. His vision had expanded far beyond helping individual children to encompass broader social change around how society views and supports diverse family structures. "I want to study psychology and social work in college," Tyler told Marcus and me during one of our family planning conversations. "I want to understand scientifically why some people struggle with accepting different kinds of families, and I want to develop programs that help change those attitudes. I think there's research that needs to be done and policies that need to be changed." Tyler's academic and career aspirations were impressive, but what struck me most was his continued focus on service and impact rather than personal achievement. He had learned that his gifts were meant to be shared, and he was already planning how to use his future education and career to maximize his positive influence on other people's lives. The most recent development in Tyler's journey had been an invitation to speak at an international conference on children's rights and family diversity. Tyler would be the youngest presenter at the conference, sharing his insights with delegates from over 50 countries who were working to improve outcomes for children in various family structures. "I'm nervous about speaking to people from so many different countries," Tyler admitted as we prepared for the trip. "What if families work differently in other places, and my story doesn't make sense to them?" "Tyler," I replied, "love is universal. The desire to belong is universal. The pain of feeling rejected is universal, and so is the healing that comes from being accepted. Your story is going to resonate with people everywhere because it's about fundamental human experiences that transcend cultural differences. Tyler's preparation for the international conference had involved researching family structures and adoption practices in different countries, which had expanded his understanding of the global scope of the issues he cared about. He had learned that children questioning their belonging was a challenge faced by families around the world, regardless of their specific cultural context. "Mom," Tyler said one evening as he worked on his conference presentation, "I think my story happened for a reason that's bigger than just me. I think it happened so I could help change how the whole world thinks about families and belonging. That feels like a really big responsibility, but also like a really important opportunity." As I watched my 11-year-old son prepare to address an international audience about resilience, identity, and family diversity, I marveled at the journey that had brought us to this moment. Rachel's cruel question about Tyler's belonging, intended to make him feel small and unwanted, had instead launched him on a path toward becoming a global advocate for acceptance and inclusion. Tyler had learned that our greatest challenges often contain the seeds of our greatest contributions. He had discovered that the people who try to diminish us sometimes end up being the catalysts for us discovering just how powerful we really are. Most importantly, he had realized that belonging is not something we wait for others to grant us, but something we claim for ourselves and then extend to others who are still searching for their place in the world. The child who once questioned whether he belonged in one family had grown into a young person who was helping families around the world understand that we all belong to each other, connected by our shared humanity and our common desire to love and be loved unconditionally. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.